have yet to see the episode myself. You did allude to the Clemson-Michigan comparison. So for the full explanation of that, again, please join Steve right there. I am also hearing that you've been a bit rough on your head coach, which you have given us a taste of that in recent weeks. So what has been your most recent? So the narrative at this point last year, coming off the South Carolina loss, was nothing can really happen in this offseason that is going to prepare me, is going to appease me during the offseason. I just have to get to the Notre Dame game and then start to see the wins pile up. Is there any kind of barometer for this offseason?
I think for Michigan, it's really now about what happens the Saturday after Thanksgiving, period, end of sentence. And I really think, and here's why I'm hard on Jimmy, Mark, and I talked about this on our podcast this week. This is my all-time favorite player when I was a kid. When we moved to Michigan, when Stevie was a chubby little 10-year-old, we moved to Grand Rapids on Vineland Street, all right?
I'm picturing that.
And you know, I was looking for a college football team. I turned on the television. This was 1983, so Steve Smith and Richard Rogers and those guys. And I saw him get to the Sugar Bowl and play Bo Jackson and Auburn and play the rear ends off and almost beat those guys, right? And then they weren't good the next year. So when you're 11 years old, you don't sit around and watch a 6-6 football team. You go outside and play, right? But then that following year, when they went from unranked in the preseason and we finished number 2 in the country, and we had Jim Harbaugh and as the quarterback, and that's what cemented my fandom. And he remains my all-time favorite Michigan player. The swagger, the resourcefulness. I loved him. And when I was growing up playing youth sports, there was always a series of numbers. I always got one of these numbers. Number 9 for Roy Hobbs, my all-time favorite baseball movie. Mm-hmm. Number 41 for Bill Laimbeer, because all the right people hated him. Number 41 for Glenn Rice. I used to sit up my driveway in Wyoming, Michigan, and just for hours trying to emulate how perfect of a jump shot he had. And then number 4. When I became, years later as an adult, when I would get the NCAA football game every year before I had a son, and I would make myself, what number do you think I always gave myself, Mark? Number 4. When I started making my son as the avatar on the game, what number do you think I gave him? Number 4. And on his flag football team, what number do you think he always tries to see if it's available? Number 4. So I am hard on him because of my affection for him. Because here is my concern, Mark. We're not, and gosh, this is going to sound condescending, and I'm sorry. It is what it is. We're not Michigan State. We're not recruiting the developmental kid that we can kind of just go 9-3 and 10-2 into perpetuity. We're not at Ohio State's recruiting level yet. You know, I would say Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama are at one level. I don't think Clemson's recruiting at that level either when you get the recruiting rankings. And then I think there's the next level. All right, so that's the penthouse suite there on the Upper East Side is those schools. And then there's like the next floor, which is still high value real estate. And that's where Clemson is and Michigan is. And Jimbo Fisher's putting Texas A&M there. And Tom Herman's putting Texas there. And Notre Dame there with Brian Kelly. Those are the schools that are on standby. They're circling the lot, waiting for a parking space to open up on the top floor, if you will. But the problem is you only get to circle it for so long. And a lot of those schools are recruiting the same kids. We're recruiting a lot of the same kids as Notre Dame. Cade McNamara, the quarterback in our class this year, we flipped him from where? From Notre Dame. All right. We're recruiting more head-to-head against the schools in this list. Quavaris Crouch, who ended up going to Clemson at the end. His other final school was who? Michigan. So we are recruiting more against the teams in this space than we are Ohio State nowadays. And so my fear is, Michigan State could go in D'Antonio's heyday. They could go 9-3, 10-2 into several years in a row because they were always cycling up with developmental guys. They had top 35, 40 recruiting classes, like Wisconsin has recently had. We're not recruiting at that level. And so my fear is if we don't have a breakthrough, we aren't going to be able to sustain recruiting at that level. And then you end up, hey, look at Miami. Miami looked like they had kind of moved into our neighborhood a year ago. That the penultimate college football rankings of the season, the second to last ones, they're number 2 in the country. Here we set 12 and a half months later, and the coach up and quit after a 7-6 season. Okay, so in this neighborhood, you either get busy living or you get busy dying, brother. You don't kind of hover on the outskirts of this neighborhood. You're either living here or you're on the outside looking in, like the little match girl with her face on the window. And so my fear is that if all these other teams that are in this neighborhood circling the elite parking lot with us, they've all had a breakthrough. Notre Dame's been to the playoff. Clemson's won the national championship. They've moved in now to this elite arena, even though they don't kind of recruit yet totally at that arena. All the other teams in our bracket have all broken through, except one. And who's the one? Us. Now, Texas hasn't broken through yet, but since Texas is kind of where Michigan was after 2016, where the trajectory appears to be up. I think Texas will be very good this fall. But if I'm wrong and they go like 9-3, Tom Herman's going to be in the same space Jim Harbaugh's in right now. All right. And so if you don't have that breakthrough, the narrative you're selling those recruits, they start looking for the new hotness or the proven hotness, and they move on. And now you're dropping down a level in recruiting. And now you are recruiting guys that you have to develop. And now you're where Stanford is at now. So I mentioned a minute ago that Stanford has lost 5 games 2 of the last 3 years. The season in between there, you know what they did? Went to the Rose Bowl. Okay? So I'm sorry, 3 of the last 4 years, they've lost 3 games or more. 2 of those seasons, they lost 5 games. The one season of the 4 where they didn't lose 3 games or more, that was the McCaffrey team that won the Rose Bowl. So Stanford has gone from a team that was winning 11 games or 12 every year for 4 years. They were in this neighborhood. They were knocking on the door, but they never broke it down. They never got into the playoff. And so what happened? They're now down to a cycle-up program. They're 8-5, 8-5, 12-1, 8-4. That's what's going to happen to us, Mark, if we don't have this breakthrough. And I think it's going to happen to us in 2020 and beyond. I don't believe we will be able to be the perennial power that we hired Jim Harbaugh to be unless he gets that breakthrough season here soon as this year.
He knows his football. He knows his history. He delivers an analogy. I would think that it almost sounds like you do this talking business for a living, Steve.
Only when people are desperate enough and have some extra money they want to just toss to the side, they call me up. Yes.
Steve Deace, Michigan Podcast. Appreciate you stopping by, Steve. It's always a fun discussion. I always learn something and take something that gets my wheels a-spinning. Maybe not quite as fast as yours, but I try to keep up.
Well, you know what? I'll take that as a compliment. One of my all-time favorite country songs is Dwight Yoakam's Fast As You. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you, Steve.
Take care.